Chapter 4, which concludes with an evening of wine, women, and song. Fat Charlie woke up. Memories of dreams of a meeting with some film star brother mingled with a dream in which President Taft had come to stay, bringing with him the entire cast of the cartoon Tom and Jerry. He showered, and he took the tube to work. All through the workday something was nagging at the back of his head, and he didn't know what it was. He misplaced things. He forgot things. At one point, he started singing at his desk, not because he was happy, but because he forgot not to. He only realized he was doing it when Graham Coates himself put his head around the door of Fat Charlie's closet to chide him. "No radios, Walkmans, MP3 players, or similar instruments of music at the office," said Graham Coates, with a ferrety glance. "It bespeaks a lackadaisical attitude, of the kind one abhors in the workday world." "It wasn't the radio," admitted Fat Charlie, his ears burning. "No? Then what, pray tell, was it?" "It was me," said Fat Charlie. "You?" "Yes. I was singing. I'm sorry." "I could have sworn it was the radio, and yet I was wrong. Good Lord. Well, with such a wealth of talents at your disposal, with such remarkable skills, perhaps you should leave us to tread the boards, entertain the multitudes, possibly do an end-of-the-pier show, rather than cluttering up a desk in an office where other people are trying to work. Eh? A place where people's careers are being managed?" "No," said Fat Charlie. "I don't want to leave. I just wasn't thinking." "Then," said Graham Coates, "you must learn to refrain from singing, save in the bath, the shower, or perchance the stands as you support your favorite football team. I myself am a Crystal Palace supporter. Or you will find yourself seeking gainful employment elsewhere." Fat Charlie smiled, then realized that smiling wasn't what he wanted to do at all, and looked serious, but by that point Graham Coates had left the room, so Fat Charlie swore under his breath, folded his arms on the desk, and put his head in them. "Was that you singing?" It was one of the new girls in the artist liaison department. Fat Charlie never managed to learn their names. They were always gone by then. "I'm afraid so." "What were you singing? It was pretty." Fat Charlie realized he didn't know. He said, "I'm not sure. I wasn't listening." She laughed at that, although quietly. "He's right. You should be making records, not wasting your time here." Fat Charlie didn't know what to say. Cheeks burning, he started crossing out numbers and making notes and gathering up post-it notes with messages on them and putting those messages up on the screen until he was sure that she had gone. Maeve Livingstone phoned. Could Fat Charlie please ensure that Graham Coates phoned her bank manager? He said he'd do his best. She told him pointedly to see that he did. Rosie called him on his mobile at 4 in the afternoon to let him know that the water was now back on again in her flat, and to tell him that, good news, her mother had decided to take an interest in the upcoming wedding and had asked her to come round that evening and discuss it. "Well," said Fat Charlie, "if she's organizing the dinner, we'll save a fortune on food." "That's not nice. I'll call you tonight and let you know how it went." Fat Charlie told her that he loved her, and he clicked the phone off. Someone was looking at him. He turned around. Graham Coates said, "He who maketh phone calls on company time, lo, he shall reap the whirlwind." Do you know who said that? "You did?" "Indeed I did," said Graham Coates. "Indeed I did. And never a truer word was spoken. Consider this a formal warning." And he smiled then, the kind of self-satisfied smile that forced Fat Charlie to ponder the various probable outcomes of sinking his fist into Graham Coates' comfortably padded midsection. He decided that it would be a toss-up between being fired and an action for assault. Either way, he thought, it would be a fine thing. Fat Charlie was not by nature a violent man. Still, he could dream. His daydreams tended to be small and comfortable things. He would like to have enough money to eat in good restaurants whenever he wished. He wanted a job in which nobody could tell him what to do. He wanted to be able to sing without embarrassment, somewhere where there were never any people around to hear him. This afternoon, however, his daydreams assumed a different shape. he could fly, for a start, and bullets bounced off his mighty chest as he zoomed down from the sky and rescued Rosie from a band of kidnapping scoundrels and dastards. She would hold him tightly as they flew off into the sunset, off to his fortress of cool, where she would be so overwhelmed with feelings of gratitude that she would enthusiastically decide not to bother with the whole waiting until they were married bit, and would start to see how high and how fast they could fill their jar. The daydream eased the stress of life in the Graham Coates agency, of telling people that their checks were in the post, of calling in the money that the agency was owed. At 6 p.m., Fat Charlie turned off his computer and walked down the 5 flights of stairs to the street. It had not rained. Overhead, the starlings were wheeling and cheeping, the dusk chorus of a city. Everyone on the pavement was hurrying somewhere. Most of them, like Fat Charlie, were walking up the Kingsway to Holborn Tube. They had their heads down, and the look about them of people who wanted to get home for the night. There was one person on the pavement who wasn't going anywhere, though. He stood there, facing Fat Charlie and the remaining commuters, and his leather jacket flapped in the wind. He was not smiling. Fat Charlie saw him from the end of the street. As he walked towards him, everything became unreal. The day melted, and he realized what he had spent the day trying to remember. "Hello, Spider," he said when he got close. Spider looked like a storm was raging inside him. He might have been about to cry. Fat Charlie didn't know. There was too much emotion on his face, in the way he stood, so that the people on the street looked away, ashamed. "I went out there," he said. His voice was dull. "I saw Mrs. Higgler. She took me to the grave. My father died, and I didn't even know." Fat Charlie said, "He was my father too, Spider." He wondered how he could have forgotten Spider, how he could have dismissed him so easily as a dream. True. The dusk sky was cross-hatched with starlings. They wheeled and crossed from rooftop to rooftop. Spider jerked and stood straight. He seemed to have come to a decision. "You are so right," he said. "We gotta do this together." "Exactly," said Fat Charlie. Then he said, "Do what?" But Spider had already hailed a cab. "We are men with troubles," said Spider to the world. "Our father is no more. Our hearts heavy in our chests. Sorrow settles upon us like pollen in hay fever season. Darkness is our lot, and misfortune our only companion." "Right-o, gentlemen," said the cabby brightly. "Where am I taking you?" "To where the 3 remedies for darkness of the soul may be found," said Spider. "Maybe we could get a curry," suggested Fat Charlie. "There are 3 things, and 3 things only, that can lift the pain of mortality and ease the ravages of life," said Spider. "These things are wine, women, and song." "Curry's nice too," pointed out Fat Charlie, but nobody was listening to him. "In any particular order?" asked the cabby. "Wine first," Spider announced. "Rivers and lakes and vast oceans of wine." "Right you are," said the cabby, and he pulled out into the traffic. "I have a particularly bad feeling about all this," said Fat Charlie, helpfully. Spider nodded. "A bad feeling?" he said. "Yeah, we both have a bad feeling. Tonight we shall take our bad feelings and share them, and face them. We shall mourn. We shall drain the bitter dregs of mortality. Pain shared, my brother, is pain not doubled, but halved. No man is an island." "Seek not to ask for whom the bell tolls," intoned the cabby. "It tolls for thee." "Whoa," said Spider. "Now that's a pretty heavy cone you got there." "Thank you," said the cabby. "That's how it ends, all right. You are some kind of philosopher. I'm Spider. This is my brother, Fat Charlie." "Charles," said Fat Charlie. "Steve," said the cabby. "Steve Burridge." "Mr. Burridge," said Spider. "How would you like to be our personal driver this evening?" Steve Burridge explained that he was coming up to the end of his shift, and would now be driving his cab home for the night, and that dinner with Mrs. Burridge and all the little Burridges awaited him. You hear that? Said Spider. A family man. Now, my brother and I are the only family we have left, and this is my first time we've met. Sounds like quite the story, said the cabby. Was there a feud? Not at all. He simply did not know that he had a brother, said Spider. Did you, asked Fat Charlie, know about me? I may have done, said Spider, but things like that, they can slip the guy's mind so easily. The cab pulled over to the curb. Where are we? Asked Fat Charlie. They hadn't gone very far. He thought they were somewhere just off Fleet Street. What you asked for? Said the cabby. Wine. Spider got out of the cab and stared at the grubby oak and grimy glass exterior of the ancient wine bar. Perfect, he said. Pay the man, brother. Fat Charlie paid the cabby. They went inside, down wooden steps to a cellar where rubicund barristers drank side by side with pallid money market fund managers. There was sawdust on the floor and a wine list chalked illegibly on a blackboard behind the bar. What are you drinking? Asked Spider. Just a glass of house red, please, said Fat Charlie. Spider looked at him gravely. We are the final scions of Anansi's line. We do not mourn our father's passing with house red. Right. Well, I'll have what you're having then. Spider went up to the bar, easing his way through the crush of people as if it was not there. In several minutes he returned, carrying 2 wine glasses, a corkscrew, and an extremely dusty wine bottle. He opened the bottle with an ease that left Fat Charlie, who always wound up picking fragments of cork from his wine, deeply impressed. Spider poured from the bottle a wine so tawny that it was almost black. He filled each glass, then put one in front of Fat Charlie. A toast, he said, to our father's memory. To Dad, said Fat Charlie, and he clinked his glass against Spider's, managing, miraculously, not to spill any as he did so, and he tasted his wine. It was peculiarly bitter and herby and salt. What is this? Funeral wine. The kind of wine you drink for gods. They haven't made it for a long time. It's seasoned with bitter aloes and rosemary, and with the tears of broken-hearted virgins. And they sell it in a Fleet Street wine bar? Fat Charlie picked up the bottle, but the label was too faded and too dusty to read. Never heard of it. The old places have the good stuff, if you ask for it, said Spider. Or maybe I just think they do. Fat Charlie took another sip of his wine. It was powerful and pungent. It's not a sipping wine, said Spider. It's a morning wine. You drain it like this. He took a huge swig. Then he made a face. It tastes better that way, too. Fat Charlie hesitated, and then took a large mouthful of the strange wine. He could imagine that he was able to taste the aloes and the rosemary. He wondered if the salt was really tears. They put the rosemary for remembrance, said Spider, and he began to top up their glasses. Fat Charlie tried to explain that he wasn't really up for too much wine tonight and that he had work tomorrow, but Spider cut him off. It's your turn to make a toast, he said. Right, said Fat Charlie. To Mum. They drank to their mother. Fat Charlie found that the taste of the bitter wine was beginning to grow on him, and he found his eyes prickling, and a sense of loss, profound and painful, ran through him. He missed his mother. He missed his childhood. He even missed his father. Across the table, Spider was shaking his head. A tear ran down Spider's face and plopped into the wine glass. He then reached for the bottle and poured more wine for them both. Fat Charlie drank. Grief ran through him as he drank, filling his head and his body with loss and the pain of absence, swelling through him like waves on the ocean. His own tears were running down his face, splashing into his drink. He fumbled in his pockets for a tissue. Spider poured out the last of the black wine for both of them. Did they really sell this wine here? They had a bottle they didn't know they had. They just needed to be reminded. Fat Charlie blew his nose. I never knew I had a brother, he said. I did, said Spider. I always meant to look you up, but I got distracted. You know how it is. Not really. Things came up. What kind of things? Things. They came up. That's what things do. They come up. I can't be expected to keep track of them all. Well, give me for instance. Spider drank more wine. Okay. The last time I decided that you and I should meet, I spent days planning it. I wanted it to go perfectly. I had to choose my wardrobe. Then I had to decide what I'd say to you when we met. I knew that the meeting of two brothers, it's the subject of epics, isn't it? I decided that the only way to treat it with the appropriate gravity would be to do it in verse. But what kind of verse? Am I going to rap it? Declaim it? I mean, I'm not going to greet you with a limerick. So, it had to be something dark, something powerful, rhythmic, epic. And then I had it. The perfect first line. Blood, cost of blood, like sirens in the night. It says so much. I knew I'd be able to get everything in there. People dying in alleyways, sweat and nightmares, the power of free spirits untamable. Everything was going to be there. And then I had to come up with a second line, and the whole thing completely fell apart. The best I could come up with was, tum tumpity, got a fright. Fat Charlie blinked. Who exactly is tum tumpity? It's not anybody. It's just there to show you what the words ought to be. But I never really got any further on it than that, and I couldn't turn up with just a first line, some tumpities, and 3 words of an epic poem, could I? That would have been disrespecting you. Well, exactly. So I went to Hawaii for the week instead. Like I said, something came up. Fat Charlie drank more of his wine. He was beginning to like it. Sometimes strong tastes fit strong emotions, and this was one of those times. It couldn't always have been the second line of a poem, though, he said. Spider put his thin hand on top of Fat Charlie's larger head. Oh, hand. Enough about me, he said. I want to hear about you. Not much to tell, said Fat Charlie. He told his brother about his life, about Rosie and Rosie's mother, about Graham Coates and the Graham Coates Agency, and his brother nodded his head. It didn't sound like too much of a life now that Fat Charlie was putting it into words. Still, said Fat Charlie, philosophically, I figure that there are those people you read about in the gossip pages of newspapers, and they are always saying how dull and empty and pointless their lives are. He held the wine bottle above his glass, hoping there was just enough wine left for another mouthful, but there was barely a drip. The bottle was empty. It had lasted much longer than it had any right to have lasted, but now there was nothing left at all. Spider stood up. I've met those people, he said, the ones from the glossy magazines. I've walked among 'em. I've seen firsthand their callow, empty lives. I've watched them from the shadows, when they thought themselves alone. And I can tell you this, I'm afraid there is not one of them who would swap lives with you at gunpoint, my brother. Come on. Huh? Where are you going? We are going. We have accomplished the first part of tonight's triune mission. Wine has been drunk. 2 parts left to go. Fat Charlie followed Spider outside, hoping the cool night air would clear his head. It didn't. Fat Charlie's head was feeling like it might float away if it wasn't firmly tied down. Woman next, said Spider, then song. It is possibly worth mentioning that in Fat Charlie's world, women did not simply turn up. You needed to be introduced to them. You needed to pluck up the courage to talk to them. You needed to find a subject to talk to them about when you did. And then, once you had achieved those heights, there were further peaks to scale. You needed to dare ask them if they were doing anything on Saturday night, and when you did, Mostly they had hair that needed washing that night, or diaries to update, or cockatiels to groom, or they simply needed to wait by the phone for some other man not to call. But Spider lived in a different world. They wandered towards the West End, stopping when they reached a crowded pub. The patrons spilled out onto the pavement, and Spider stopped and said hello to what turned out to be a birthday celebration for a young lady named Sibylla, who was only too flattered when Spider insisted on buying a birthday round of drinks for her and her friends. Then he told jokes, and the Duck says, "Put it on my bill. What do you think I am, some kind of pervert?" And he laughed at his own jokes, a booming, joyful laugh. He could remember the names of all the people around him. He talked to people and listened to what they said. When Spider announced it was time to find another pub, the entire birthday group decided, as one woman, that they were coming with him. By the time they reached their third pub, Spider resembled someone from a rock video. He was draped with girls. They snuggled in. Several of them had kissed him, half jokingly, half seriously. Fat Charlie watched in envious horror. "Are you his bodyguard?" asked one of the girls. "What? His bodyguard, are you?" "No," said Fat Charlie. "I'm his brother." "Wow," she said. "I didn't know he had a brother. I think he's amazing." "Me too," said another, who had spent some time cuddling Spider until forced away by the press of other bodies with similar ideas. She noticed Fat Charlie for the first time. "Are you his manager?" "No, he's the brother," said the first girl. "He was just telling me," she added pointedly. The second ignored her. "Are you from the States as well?" she asked. "You've got a bit of an accent." "When I was younger," said Fat Charlie, "we lived in Florida. My dad was American, and my mum was from, well, she was originally from St. Andrews, but she grew up in—" Nobody was listening. When they moved on from there, the remnants of the birthday celebration accompanied them. The women surrounded Spider, inquiring where they were going next. Restaurants were suggested, as were nightclubs. Spider simply grinned and kept walking. Fat Charlie trailed along behind them, feeling more left out than ever. They stumbled through the neon and strip light world. Spider had his arms around several of the women. He would kiss them as he walked, indiscriminately, like a man taking a bite from first one summer fruit, then another. None of them seemed to mind. "It's not normal," thought Fat Charlie. "That's what it's not." He wasn't even trying to keep up, merely attempting not to be left behind. He could still taste the bitter wine on his tongue. He became aware that a girl was walking along beside him. She was small and pretty in a pixie-ish sort of way. She tugged at his sleeve. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Where are we going?" "We're mourning my father," he said, "I think." "Is this a reality TV show?" "I hope not." Spider stopped and turned. The gleam in his eyes was disturbing. "We are here," he announced. "We have arrived. It is what he would have wanted." There was a handwritten message on a sheet of bright orange paper on the door outside the pub. It said on it, "Tonight, upstairs, karaoke." "Song," said Spider. Then he said, "It's showtime." "No," said Fat Charlie. He stopped where he was. "It's what he loved," said Spider. "I don't sing, not in public, and I'm drunk. And I really don't think this is a really good idea." "It's a great idea." Spider had a perfectly convincing smile. Properly deployed, a smile like that could launch a holy war. Fat Charlie, however, was not convinced. "Look," he said, trying to keep the panic from his voice. "There are some things that people don't do, right? Some people don't fly, some people don't have sex in public, some people don't turn into smoke and blow away. I don't do any of those things, and I don't sing either." "Not even for Dad?" "Especially not for Dad. He's not going to embarrass me from beyond the grave. Well, not any more than he has already." "Excuse me," said one of the young women. "Excuse me, but are we going in? "'Cause I'm getting cold out here and Sibylla needs to wee." "We're going in," said Spider, and he smiled at her. Fat Charlie wanted to protest, to stand his ground, but he found himself swept inside, hating himself. He caught up with Spider on the stairs. "I'll go in," he said, "but I won't sing." "You're already in." "I know, but I'm not singing." "Not much point in saying you won't go in if you're already in." "I can't sing." "You're telling me I inherited all the musical talent as well?" "I'm telling you that if I have to open my mouth in order to sing in public, I'll throw up." Spider squeezed his arm reassuringly. "You watch how I do it," he said. The birthday girl and two of her friends stumbled up onto the little dais and giggled their way through Dancing Queen. Fat Charlie drank a gin and tonic somebody put into his hand, and he winced at every note they missed, at every key change that didn't happen. There was a round of applause from the rest of the birthday group. Another of the women took the stage. It was the pixie-ish one who had asked Fat Charlie where they were going. The opening chord sounded to "Stand By Me," and she began, using the phrase in its most approximate and all-encompassing way, to sing along. She missed every note, came in too soon or too late on every line, and misread most of them. Fat Charlie felt for her. She climbed down from the stage and came towards the bar. Fat Charlie was going to say something sympathetic, but she was glowing with joy. "That was so great," she said. "I mean, that was just amazing." Fat Charlie bought her a drink, a large vodka and orange. "That was such a laugh," she told him. "Are you gonna do it? Go on, you have to do it. I bet you won't be any crappier than I was." Fat Charlie shrugged in a way that, he hoped, indicated that he contained within him depths of crap yet unplumbed. Spider walked over to the little stage as if a spotlight was following him. "I bet this will be good," said the vodka and orange. "Did someone say you were his brother?" "No," said Fat Charlie ungraciously. "I said that he was my brother." Spider began to sing. It was "Under the Boardwalk." It wouldn't have happened if Fat Charlie had not liked the song so much. When Fat Charlie was 13, he believed that "Under the Boardwalk" was the greatest song in the world. But by the time he was a jaded and world-weary 14-year-old, it had become Bob Marley's "No Woman, No Cry." And now Spider was singing his song, and singing it well. He sang it in tune, he sang it as if he meant it. People stopped drinking, stopped talking, and when they looked at him, they listened. When Spider finished singing, people cheered. Had they been wearing hats, they might have flung them into the air. "I can see why you wouldn't want to follow that," said the vodka and orange to Fat Charlie. "I mean, you can't follow that, can you?" "Well," said Fat Charlie. "I mean," she said with a grin, "you can see who's got all the talent in your family." She tipped her head as she said it, and tilted her chin. It was the tin chilt that did it. Fat Charlie headed towards the stage, putting one foot in front of the other in an impressive display of physical dexterity. He was sweating. The next few minutes passed in a blur. He spoke to the DJ, chose his song from the list, Unforgettable, waited for what seemed like a brief eternity, and was handed a microphone. His mouth was dry. His heart was fluttering in his chest. On the screen was his first word, Unforgettable. Now, Fat Charlie could really sing. He had range and power and expression. When he sang, his whole body became an instrument. The music started. In Fat Charlie's head, he was all ready to open his mouth and to sing. Unforgettable, he would sing. He would sing it to his dead father and to his brother and the night, telling them all that they were things it was impossible to forget. Only he couldn't do it. There were people looking up at him. Barely 24 of them, in the upstairs room of a pub. Many of them were women. In front of an audience, Fat Charlie couldn't even open his mouth. He could hear the music playing, but he just stood there. He felt very cold. His feet seemed a long way away. He forced his mouth open. "I think," he said, very distinctly into the microphone. Over the music, and he heard his words echoing back from every corner of the room. I think I'm going to be sick. There was no graceful exit from the stage. After that, everything got a bit wobbly. There are myth places. They exist, each in their own way. Some of them are overlaid on the world. Others exist beneath the world, as it is, like an underpainting. There are mountains. There are rocky places you will reach before you come to the cliffs that border the end of the world. And there are caves in those mountains, deep caves, that were inhabited long before the first men walked the earth. They are inhabited still. And that's the end of the chapter.